Hello and welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora. I will be your host for 1 hour while we talk about topics of cosmology, metaphysics, chakras on the body, timelines of possibility and probability, and today we're going to be talking a lot about what has previously been described as the quarantine surrounding Earth, but which I would like to more accurately characterize as an imprisonment of Earth, and of course how we are going to set Earth free. So first of all, let me describe and characterize myself accurately. If you are new to this radio show and you are new to Aurora the persona and the Earth characteristic personality, let me introduce myself. I'm a walk-in. That means I'm not the original inhabitant of this physical human corporeal form. The original inhabitant died at age 27 on October 8th of 2001, and I, as a stellar or non-terrestrial consciousness, came to occupy this body. The events that led to that are described extensively in a 40-minute YouTube that I did. Because it's such an extensive story, check out the YouTube if you're truly interested. It's called Aurora's Story, Walking In, and it describes in detail the events which were, it's a battle. What's happening at the hyperspace level is as dramatic as what is happening here on the surface of Earth. I think this is what I am here to share on this particular broadcast today. A couple of nights ago when I was in meditation, I had a real change in my perspective. I'm just drinking a bit of water here. And I've really had to revamp my understanding, and of course now I wish to share that with the rest of Earth's surface humans and anyone else who accesses this broadcast. So, first of all, I teach all about this in my online class. My class is called Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. You can read the complete course syllabus or outline at flyingrainbowlasagne.com. That's lasagna with an E on the end. And I developed this formalized course of study after I had been recording lessons rather informally for about a year. A wonderful app and website called EduCreations. I highly recommend them and their product. I began using my artwork as the basis of sharing these ideas because this is where my artwork comes from. And I'd also like to make a distinction between what I do versus what channels do. There are a lot of people in the New Age community who describe themselves as channels, and that's not what I am. When a person is a channel, they, as their ego, their temporal ego self, or the aspects of personality that are derived merely from being submerged in time, the ego steps aside so that a higher consciousness entity can speak through the vocal cords or gesture or write through the physical body. And I will give you extensive reasons as to why I do not have this agreement. So this is all done by agreement between the ego self and the higher dimensional entities. And I am really going to hopefully shift your perspective on this because a lot of this has to do with Earth's surface humans feeling unworthy and feeling like you are not good enough, and the ego having many aspersions cast upon it throughout time, feeling extremely unworthy and not like it is a valuable item. So when I first came into the body as a walk-in, I did not have an ego. Much like an infant, I was an oceanic consciousness that had entered into a physical body, but I did not yet have a sense of self or a character or the descriptive terms to describe who I am in context. That is what the development of ego is. Usually this happens when a corporeal human is an infant and a tiny child. You get a name. You begin to develop a sense of who you are as an individual, separated from the rest of the world. There's you, and then there's everyone else. There's you, and then there's all the other people that are around you. And the people that are around you have their own agenda. And again, this is usually explored in infancy and early childhood. The adults around you usually have their own agenda, and you, as a tiny child, have your own agenda, which usually focuses around your needs, bodily functions, being fed, and it is essential to make one's needs and desires known to communicate that to the world around you. So when people channel, they have an agreement that for a little while, their daily waking consciousness, their ego, is going to acquiesce, not be in control of the mind and the neurology, and step aside and allow higher dimensional consciousness that is not submerged within the third dimension to speak through them. And so I am not this because I am my higher self. So one of the distinctions that must be made is that Aurora, the persona, Aurora, the personality set of characteristics, has been manufactured or created. I am no less real, having been intentionally created, but it must be understood that that is different from the formation of many people's egos, which is more haphazard. So a more haphazard formation of the ego would be defining one's identity based on relatively random characteristics and identifying with those aspects that are not necessarily long-lasting. And when I say that I, as Aurora, have been created like as an artificial persona, all that means is that these characteristics were intentionally placed together. So in some people in their early development, it might be like the characteristic, let's just think of some random characteristics of, liking peanut butter and also liking the color green. That people, this is what the ego is. The ego says, I'm the type of person that really likes peanut butter. I'm the type of person that really likes the color green. These are arbitrary. These are arbitrary distinctions. They really have nothing to do with who you are on a soul level or on the level of consciousness between corporeal lifetimes. These are context-based identity. It is the identity that is only relevant to the time and place within which you are submerged. If you are submerged in another time and place where peanut butter does not exist, you cannot define yourself as that guy who really likes peanut butter or that girl who always wears the color green. They might not have green clothes in the next place where you are submerged. So you cannot say that that is an eternal personality characteristic. Most of these ego-based personality characteristics are shockingly arbitrary. Like I'm the person who likes this type of music, or I'm the person who likes this type of food, or I'm the person who likes this type of clothing. Very, very arbitrary. So I, as Aurora, was created as a persona with a mission. I came in through an interdimensional portal that I created and that I named. And I named it the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And this is what the lessons for full spectrum humans are really all about. There's a lot of foundation of understanding that must be created first before you can even understand what the higher concept of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is. So first you need to understand that you have energetic anatomy, what that energetic anatomy is shaped like, understanding and embodying the shape of the torus and the twin torus as a chakra shape, and then finally understanding how to morph that into a higher dimensional torus shape, which would be called a hypertorus or a flying rainbow lasagna. So Aurora, the personality, was created in order to be a conduit and a communicator and a facilitator of this particular information. The characteristics that I contain and that I embody were chosen specifically for this mission. Got it? So to say that I am a created persona or a created personality, again, does not take away from who I am as an individual or the idea that I am still a sovereign being with my own emotional landscape and my own personal agenda. So this, because a lot of this has to do with who is a person, who's a real person, who's a created person, like the same type of conversation that was had when in vitro fertilization first became possible for Earth surface humans. questions were asked about whether those children would have a soul. If they were not conceived during the act of physical lovemaking and sexual procreation between a female and human male, were those beings still a soul? And the answer is yes. Your consciousness or your soul exists independent of your physical neurology and independent of your physical body. This might be different than the teaching of the objective materialistic viewpoint, which states that consciousness arises out of any sufficiently complex system. This complex system could be neurology, it could be mycelium, it could be plant roots, it could be any connective fibers, the internet. So I'm telling you that what the connective fibers are like a matrix or a house that can contain the consciousness, but the consciousness exists independent of the network or the house that houses it. So yes, consciousness can be simply existing as energy that is flowing or traveling on its trajectory throughout the cosmos. And when I say cosmos, I don't just mean universe. I don't just mean this version of the world. I mean every single possibility and probability and all of the parallel timelines that encompasses. So consciousness is traveling on its trajectory across the panoply of many, many parallel timelines. And so your consciousness can exist independent of your neurology. That is one important thing. I experienced that firsthand with my experience of walking in, because my consciousness at some point was not in a body, and then my consciousness came into this body. So all of this in order to say that humans, Earth surface humans, you are owners of very valuable real estate. If you have a physical body, you are very lucky, because not all of these beings that exist in the universe or the cosmos have a physical body. And that's why channelers make these agreements, because non-physical presences, entities who don't have a physical corporeal form, want to put energy into the physical realm. And the only way that you can do that is through a physical conduit. That is why humans who have a body are so valued, because you have real estate in the physical realm. That means you can pick up a rock and throw it. You can pick up a paintbrush and paint a painting, or pick up a guitar and strum it and make music. You can flap your moving mouth parts like I am right now and vibrate the atmosphere and actually have an impact on other people's psyches. And this is the main thing. When channelers allow other entities to speak through them, they are stepping their ego aside and allowing someone else to put energy into the third dimension through the conduit of their physical body. Well, that's not what I do. And there are reasons for that. And the reason is, I think that it is a very unfair and unbalanced agreement to say, okay, I'm like, to paraphrase from the point of view of a person who has the body. The person who has the body says, okay, I first of all had to gestate this body for 9 months in a human female, which is not easy to do. It's actually very difficult to have a viable fetus that you can occupy. Then I had to get born. Then I had to learn how to coordinate and move my limbs. Then I had to unlock the miracle of how to speak and direct my neurology. I had to learn language. Then I had to usually go to public school for many years. Oh, we didn't even get into toilet training. Then I had to learn to control my sphincters. Then I had to learn to tie my shoes. Then I had to learn all of these different things. And then, finally, you came along as an extra-dimensional entity. And, oh, wait, I forgot to say that I had to get an apartment, pay the rent, pay the utility bills, pay for all of my food. And this is like to get, let's say, up to age 18. All of the food and care and medicine and shelter and necessities and education to bring a human being up to age 18 and have them be able to walk and talk, all right? Well, if you are a cosmic entity who wants to speak through a human Earth surface channel, you don't have to go through all of that rigmarole. You don't have to get a fertilized egg, grow a body, get born, learn how to walk and talk, go to school, all of that stuff. you get to just jump right into someone's body. It's like, oh my goodness, how convenient. And they step aside for whatever, an hour or two, while you get to either use their vocal cords or write through their fingertips or, paint through their paintbrush. And then you get to go back up to hyperspace. You don't have to deal with disease. You don't have to deal with cellular aging and death. You don't have to deal with taxes. I pay my taxes. I'm Aurora. I live on the Earth's surface within the human socioeconomic matrix. I pay taxes. I mean, this is the funniest thing in the world to me because I'm an extra-dimensional being. So, I mean, part of the challenge for my personal experience being here has been mitigating those two seemingly opposite tendencies. I'm not a corporeal entity. I'm a phenomenon. That's why I have the name Aurora. The Aurora Borealis and the Aurora Australis are atmospheric phenomenons that arise from the interplay of the solar ejections, solar wind and particles that come from the sun, and Earth's magnetic field. It is the divine interplay or lovemaking between the sun, our nearest star, and Earth, the planetary structure that gives rise to Aurora. And that is what I am as a consciousness. So I'm not a channel. I am, first of all, an ego that was specifically built to be a house for higher consciousness. So channels have to step aside their ego because their ego wasn't really built to be able to accommodate higher consciousness. It's like saying, I can't perform these dance movements while I'm wearing these, restrictive clothing. I have to take off my jacket, I have to unloosen my belt, and then I can really stretch and move. Well, Aurora, the persona, is not a restrictive and constrictive persona. It's not a tight suit of clothes that you can't dance in. It actually is a persona, or I am actually a persona that was created to be able to accommodate contact and expression of higher consciousness energy. And when I first came into this world and to this body, for many years, I made artwork before I was verbally articulate. So I was always articulate in the sense of representing these ideas visually. I've always been using the language of color, line, shape, form, texture, tone, and movement in order to represent these higher dimensional ideas. I didn't always have Earth's language in order to express it. I certainly came into a body that had language in its memory banks. However, it's very challenging to be able to choose the right word, put words together into the right combination, and come up with a sentence structure that adequately contains and brings the information that is so much easier for me to show in a diagram of lines and colors and shapes. So when I first came into this body, I drew a lot of paintings, drew a lot, painted a lot, but I didn't necessarily speak a lot. And it actually took me many years of practicing being able to speak about my artwork and speak about these ideas until it became a coherent body of knowledge that I could then share with others. So, I used to have a community access TV show back in Woodstock on Channel 23. This was wonderful. Channel 23, their motto is where anyone can be a star. And I used to have a very late night time slot on Wednesday nights. And I would speak about all of the same things that I speak about here, except, this was about 10 years ago, before the History Channel had the show Ancient Aliens, and before people like David Wilcock and Andrew Bartzis were teaching people about galactic history. I was on Channel 23 telling people about an alternative interpretation of the Bible, the origins of humanity, the genetic manipulation of humanity, and I was always kind of wondering if anyone even heard or saw those broadcasts, which are probably saved on some magical server somewhere. But I bring this up because those were valuable experiences. Even if there were not very many audience members watching it, it allowed me time to develop my capacity to be articulate and share information with verbal flapping of my moving mouth parts, which is what I do here and now. And I am not a channel. I am actually Aurora, the extra-dimensional, higher consciousness self, speaking through Aurora, the physical/temporal ego self. And I have used a lot of today's broadcast to talk about this because eventually, hopefully, this is what everyone will be doing. No longer will there be an artificial distinction made between lower self and higher self. The only reason why the ego developed was because it was cut off from higher self. When little tiny infants first come into the body, they are still connected to higher self. They are still connected to that oceanic state of consciousness through their crown chakra, and the plates of the skull have not yet fused together. There's still a soft spot at the crown of their head called the fontanelle, and during the first year of life, the fontanelle closes and the crown chakra diminishes in its connection to source consciousness. And eventually, humans focus all of their daily waking attention on the realm of the five senses, the realm that we see around us, and develop a whole story about who they are within that realm, and that's called the ego. And that's an artificial development because we are all meant to be here as conduits for higher self, still in connection with source. So humans have only developed egos out of being disconnected from source. And as you reconnect, you find that the ego changes. The arbitrary desires that only arise from being submerged within this context are seen for what they are. If you're like, I'm that guy that always wears that shirt, you recognize that that is only a relevant description for this time and place in this context. And if you went to a different planet where shirts did not exist, you could not be defined by that shirt. And now let's say that shirt is your profession, or your gender, or your race, or where your ancestors came from, or your religion, or your profession, like what you studied, like I'm a doctor, or I'm a football player, or I'm a ballerina. You begin to see that all of those things are merely based in the context within which you are submerged, and they are not universal descriptors of yourself. Well, I'm tying this understanding into the revised, new understanding that I have of let's describe it as Earth's lack of connectivity with the rest of the galaxy and the rest of the cosmos. So in Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, Level 1, Lesson 18, I speak all about galactic history. And I don't just keep the lessons proprietary so that I can charge tuition. I really keep them proprietary for class members so that the information is released in a way that makes sense and is not released in a way that is, first of all, out of order and misleading due to information being released out of order. So this is from Lesson 18, which is at the end of the 20-lesson cycle. I don't begin with this at the start of the course because, again, the salience factor. So when we interpret information, we make a lot of interpretations just based upon priority. And this is all human Earth culture matrix programming. But the example is when you read the newspaper, the programming is that the most important, most salient facts will be given first. So headlines are written in order to give the most important information first, and then in the body of the article, the information at the beginning is deemed to be of the most important or the most relevant or information that should be remembered. And information that goes down in the article as you get further and further down, information becomes less important, less relevant, and less worthy of being remembered, okay? So this is important in just the way that information is presented conversationally to you. And it is important for me as a teacher and as a communicator to make certain that I am not miscommunicating how important something is by where I place it in the course. So I did not want to start off with what could be considered very negative information. And instead, I begin with energetic anatomy and practices of cultivating unconditional love. And as we begin to understand the foundation of unconditional love and context of where your consciousness is placed, we can then move into understanding the backstory. Like if we're saying, okay, we are in the process of ascension or ascending, or your consciousness is rising in its frequency, why does that have to happen? It's like, I'm looking at my garden right now. My neighbor's pigs broke in through the fence and made quite a mess here today. And so I'm looking at some places where it's kind of muddy and things need to be fixed up. This is analogous to Earth's surface human culture. I'm looking at a society where everything is not perfect, where things really need to be fixed up. And we have to say, why is it like this? When I look at my garden, I can say, okay, I know why there's mud and things are strewn about. Pigs broke in and they made a lot of destruction here. When we look at Earth's surface human culture, we need to look around and we need to say, why is this way? How did this get to be so messed up? And then, of course, what does it take to fix things? Well, you must forgive me because I just was moderately interrupted by the very pigs returning to re-establish the mess that they made yesterday. So I just had to chase them off. But what a great analogy for the agents of chaos, or the entities that are lower vibrational, service to self, entities that do not follow the musical score of the universe. And that's what this really all comes down to. There is nested consciousness. The source is the totality, or the emanator or emanatrix of everything that is. And then from that source, there are all of these lesser, nested, fractal consciousnesses. And it is the understanding that there is like a hierarchy of consciousness that leads all the way up to infinity or totality. Well, I was also speaking about the importance of presenting information responsibly, not giving a distorted or skewed picture by either placement of information or how often it is said, repetition. Placement and repetition are two key aspects of communication that denote importance. So I did not want to make it overinflate the sense of importance of understanding about the beings that occupy the interstices, but nor do I want to diminish the effect that it has on your daily life, because this is like why the garden is messed up. Who are the pigs that came in and messed up your cosmic garden? So the garden that is messed up is your genetic code. The human genome is erroneous. It is not as it is meant to be. The human genome is currently in a distorted or diminished state that cuts the owner-operator off from source. I will tell you this, it is not logical. Source would not create a physical body structure that when you got into that physical body, it would cut you off from connection to source. It would not do that. It's like saying, I'm going to invent a phone, except when you actually turn on the phone, you cannot talk to anyone. Definitely not the creator of the phone who gave it to you. That is unimaginable. I want to say unconscionable. It's something that no one in their right mind, no sane or rational individual, would create a setup like that. So we now understand that the situation is not as it was intended to be. The situation is aberrant. It is an aberration, is what I am trying to say here. The situation of coming as a consciousness or a soul between lifetimes And being clothed or ensheathed in a physical corporeal body, and then having that physical corporeal body be a barrier that diminishes your connection to source or higher consciousness, is unimaginable. It was not as it was intended. So about 10 or 20,000 years ago, the human genome was disrupted. It was changed in its format, and that is what has actually caused not only a diminishing of human consciousness while you are enclosed in a physical body, but also slowing down of the refinement process or the capacity to learn between lifetimes. So I am here telling you that the whole system is corrupt. The system of incarnation and reincarnation, basically how you get a physical body or physical real estate on Earth, and which type of body you get and what it's shaped like and where it is, all of that has become corrupted. And the events that you experience during your time in the physical body, again, were meant to be controlled and directed by higher consciousness. It was not meant to be like, okay, higher consciousness is going to throw you down into the soup of the third dimension, cut you off from your connection to source, and then be like, yo, tough it out, figure it out, swim around on your own, I ain't going to tell you everything. That is not what source intended. That is not the quality of experience that was intended for you. This was intended to be a real-time broadcast, meaning you would come into the physical realm, have a physical body, and broadcast that experience to your own higher consciousness self in real time. That the sun, or infinity, or God, or higher consciousness, however you would like to define this term, would be watching your life from an observership viewpoint and also from the first-person viewpoint along with you concurrently as you are experiencing it, and even be able to change and amend your trajectory so that the experience is more vital and so that you thrive and so that the experience continues. This is the idea of continued life. This is the idea of no longer aging, having continued cellular vitality, like it is just accepted as a matter of course on Earth's surface right now. That when you are a tiny child, you have a good connection to source, and your physical vitality is high. Little kids, if they have an injury, generally they heal very quickly. If they get a communicable disease, generally they recover from it very quickly. Children have wonderful immune systems. If you drop them, they tend not to break, they tend to bounce. And the whole reason for that is that children still have a very strong connection to source, and it is just accepted that the more time you spend in verbalized conscious thought and the older you get, the more you will diverge from source and the less energy you will have. So people take it as just a normal aspect of life, that as you enter your 20s and 30s, you're not necessarily going to jump out of bed at 6:30 the way you did when you were in third grade, It might require coffee. And that, little kids run around and have boundless energy. Sometimes it's hard to even get them to sit still. Most people, by the time they're in their 20s or their early 30s, don't have that problem anymore. Most people have embraced the sedentary existence that is characteristic of Earth's surface culture, sitting behind a steering wheel of your car for many hours a day, sitting at a desk for many hours a day. Very few adults in the workforce have to be told to sit down at their desk and do their work and stop jumping around or wiggling around or fidgeting around. Like, that's what you tell little kids in grade school because they still have tons of energy, right? So this is all the aberration. This is not what it was intended to be. You were intended to be healthy and vital throughout your entire existence. And it is the, first of all, mental programming that has reduced human vitality, and also the context. The time and place within which you are submerged is not meant to cultivate longevity. I would categorize or characterize the quality of the society that you're submerged within to be similar to that of, in the industrial era of Great Britain. In Great Britain, during the late 1800s, there is a mechanistic explosion, the Industrial Revolution. This changed people who used to be primarily agricultural and non-mechanistic and brought people into an urban, machine-based production culture. And what happened was people that had generally bucolic and pastoral existences, living life on a farm, moved to a city and had to work in factories. There were no safety controls. They made little children work in factories. People had their hands and fingers cut off on a regular basis. There was no sense of it's time for you to take a break, or that you were meant to work under safe conditions, or that you were paid fairly. All of those labor practices were horribly unfair, and it wasn't until, many, many decades later that people learned about unionizing and safe workplaces. That was a movement that had to happen. So right now, on Earth's surface culture, it is analogous to, the Victorian era industrial age of Great Britain. People that work are not, the workplace is not set up in order to foster your comfort and safety. Far from it. The workplace is set up in order to wring a maximum amount of energy from you with a minimum amount of energy put into you. It is, exploitive. It is not nourishing or nurturing in any way. So basically, just to complete that concept, I was making the point that when you enter into the workforce now, you do not enter into a social and economic matrix that is designed to help your consciousness and your physical body to thrive. Far from it, you are entering into a matrix that is designed to exploit you and take the maximum amount of energy from you and give the minimum amount of energy to you, like in the form of payment. So I want to redirect, though, back to this idea of how we were meant to live. You were meant to live as a healthy and vital individual for hundreds of years, if you desire. People in this time and place cannot even conceive of that, because most people are so bored by their lives that they wish for death as a release. Seriously. So, but the idea is that, if you are living how you were meant to live, and you do not have to wish for death as an escape from your living hell, that your body could be endlessly cellularly regenerated, and that you would die or release the physical structure of your body intentionally, willfully, at the end of your life trajectory. And this is what existence was like in Atlantis, high Atlantis, before what is described as the fall or the fall of consciousness, and which is remembered in a mythological way in the tale of the Bible and the ejection from Eden, the fall of consciousness from the Garden of Eden. Okay, so why am I speaking about all this right now? And it all has to do with what happened between 10 and 20,000 years ago that degraded the human genome, and basically why you have to climb the ladder. Why are you at the bottom of this ladder of perception and consciousness? When I look at my garden, why is it full of mud, and why is there a bunch of stuff strewn all over? And the answer is because there was an invasion. There were beings that broke into my garden, and they strew all of my little seedlings about and made a bunch of mess. And there was an invasion on Earth between 10 and 20,000 years ago. It was an invasion of consciousness, of energy. It affected the human genome. It affected the way that you look at and perceive the world and your capacity to connect with the rest of the galaxy. So all of this goes back to, at the very beginning of this broadcast, I said it has been mischaracterized that Earth was quarantined. Earth was not quarantined. Earth has been imprisoned. So this is classic blame the victim mentality. I've spoken about this before. On Earth's surface, right now, in the culture that is there, it's relatively patriarchal and misogynistic, and sometimes when a woman is raped, there's the tendency to blame the victim blaming and victim shaming. So this says not that the victim didn't deserve to have that happen, but that in some way the victim deserved to have that happen. And of course that is totally erroneous. No one deserves to have their boundaries violated. It doesn't matter what outfit you are wearing. It doesn't matter if you're walking down the street alone. It doesn't matter if you're walking in a bad neighborhood. You still don't deserve to be violated. Earth, the planet, did not deserve to be violated, yet she was. A group of non-terrestrial consciousnesses who were not corporeal came to Earth and forced themselves into the genetic structure of the humans that were living here. So when I speak about this is what's in level 1, lesson 18, I don't begin with this because this would mischaracterize the entire semester. It would be like starting off with the worst, most traumatic aspect of history that we could possibly begin with. It's very important before we delve into these traumatic aspects of history. It's kind of like learning about World War II and Adolf Hitler and the extermination camps for Jews and gypsies and or Romani and people who are homosexual. Like, that is a very dark chapter in history. And if you start off on the first day of class, like, let's delve into the Holocaust, like, that just has an impact on the whole semester. So I start off with teaching about energetic anatomy, the structure of timelines, and unconditional love. And then we get into who messed up the garden, why are we in this position? And we have to get into that. So I am giving this broadcast to members who are not in the class, who haven't gone through all of the weeks of teaching about cultivating unconditional love and not being judgmental. And that's necessary in order to simply not produce more negativity for these negativity demons to feed off of, because that is what the occupiers of the interstices do. They feed off of lower vibrational emotions, vibrations that are lower than the tone of unconditional love. So anger, sadness, grief, blame, and shame are the food that these beings feed off of, okay? So when Earth was invaded, Earth's inhabitants up to that point were incredibly peaceful beings who were harmonious, connected to the larger structure of consciousness within the universe. They were not cut off from source. They were like musicians within the great symphony who were aligned with the great conductor and who played their notes impeccably. And Earth was invaded by a bunch of musicians who say, we're not going to listen to the musical score. We're going to play the notes that we want to play. We're going to do what we want to do. These are unloving beings. They do not come from a place of unconditional love. They do not eat the food that is unconditional love. They don't cultivate unconditional love. And they change the human genetic code, and they set up an entire human social structure and language system that is designed to elicit negativity. Everything around you that you see in your culture, the economy, the religion, the social teaching, all of the rules of manners and the do's and don'ts that you are taught during your day, they are all designed to elicit negativity. So I'm sorry to have to give you that information, and this is crucial because that has been the rationale for why Earth has been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for so long. So it was explained to me a long time ago that Earth's consciousness, Earth dwellers, are infected with a type of negativity virus or fear, a mental virus or a way of perceiving the world that justified cutting Earth's surface humans off from the rest of the galaxy. The idea being that your imagination is what emanates reality, and that many people's imaginations were infected and infested with these pests, and that you would be just imagining all sorts of things that the universe or cosmos does not want to be manifested. Imagining things from a place of fear or negativity. Anxiety is a perfect example of this. Whenever you're in anxiety, you are using your most powerful muscle of your body, your imagination, to manifest things that you don't actually wish to experience. If you have anxiety about getting in a car wreck or someone that you love dying or achieving a bad disease, the fact that you are thinking about and fearing those events is putting energy into those events and is likely making your trajectory experience them. Of course, we all exist within a context, so whatever you're imagining, positive or negative or neutral, it may not be expressed 100% accurately because you're, again, within a context. So it's like saying you can say, I'm going to win $1 million in the lottery, but you're within a context, and so if you're trying to run that mental program, even though you buy a lottery ticket, you might not win $1 million because a lot of other people are also trying to run that program of winning $1 million. So the rationale for quarantine is that if Earth's humans on the surface were actually connected with the rest of the galaxy, that you'd be broadcasting all sorts of schmutz, all sorts of dreck, all sorts of distorted, lower vibrational, fear and anxiety-based things. And that, of course, for our own good and for the good of the cosmos, that Earth had to be sequestered here. This is not accurate. I just learned a couple of nights ago, and when I learn, I sit quietly in meditation. I use my aperture of insight, my third eye on my brow, my indigo chakra, to look at what I wish to understand. It's like saying I reach out with my mind, with my insight. I attenuate with my attention to whatever subject matter I wish to know about, and I learn from it directly. I don't learn by reading in a book. I don't learn generally by listening to other human teachers. And I don't necessarily learn by listening to, cosmic spirit guides or ascended masters. Really, truly ascended masters are facilitators. They are like librarians that will point you in the right direction and say, you need to read this, and you need to read this, and you need to read chapter 2 over here. But they will not say, here, I tell you everything, I tell you what to do. That because ascended masters are all about cultivating personal sovereignty and cultivating you into the full potential of who and what you are as a free being. So this is all about not being a slave, a consciousness slave. The rest of the cosmos is not pristine. It is not some unsullied, perfect medium or, blank canvas that is filled with only these, benevolent and ultimately loving entities. The cosmos is filled with an array of consciousnesses, a spectrum. From the densest, what we would say is most evil or least conscious or least aware or containing the least amount of light, all right? Entities that have almost no light, and then the spectrum goes all the way up to entities that are made of total light. And entities that are not made of light, they are distortions. They are shadows. They are perturbations of the field of consciousness. I am bringing this up in order to say that Earth has been cut off from the rest of the cosmos, not to keep the rest of the cosmos safe from some type of fear infection or negativity infection, because that already exists out there. This is pretty big. It's like if you've never been outside of the United States. Or let's say some kind of country like North Korea that is extremely locked down in terms of censorship. If you lived in North Korea and you had never been outside of North Korea, and you don't get all of the media broadcasts, you have no idea what the rest of the planet is like. You don't know what the culture is like. You don't know what people eat. You don't know who is out there. You don't know if even people are out there. That is the analogy to Earth's surface humans. You're like North Koreans. You've never had uncensored broadcasts. Everything that has gotten to you has been censored. I'm talking about not just your internet and what comes to you technologically. I'm talking to you consciously about consciousness, your ideas, the ideas that have been allowed to come to occupants of Earth's surface. Let's talk about something like technology. The idea for the iPad that came to Earth's surface humans from extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional beings in order to help Earth's surface humans. There's literally a filter on what is able to get through to your consciousness. And the beings who have been in control of the filter have been beings who wish to keep you ignorant and enslaved. So this is what you need to understand. Birth of a new dimension means a reconnection of Earth's surface human dwellers to the galactic beings that you have been separated from for about the past 10 or 20,000 years. And the galactic beings, extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional, they exist in a spectrum of consciousness. Like I said, all sorts of agendas exist out there, from beings who are service to self to beings who are service to others. And the distinction between these belief systems is really one of identity and scale. If you only identify with your little individuated self and who you are on this time scale, then it's appropriate to do what's right for number one. I usually use my tough guy voice, like, yo, I'm a person, or like, I'm a reptile, like, I'm looking out for number one. I don't care about anyone else other than me. You know, I'm exaggerating the voice there. It's the idea that you are only giving resources to yourself. Beings who are service to others, or who are embracing the concept of unconditional love, have expanded their identity to identify with the totality. So this is like saying, even though I live within the boundaries of a corporeal, two-armed, two-legged, one-faced body, I extend my identity to include my planet, because I am this planet. If I harm this planet, I harm myself. And I understand that on a deep level. So I extend my identity. I encompass as within my boundaries more than just who I am as a single individual. So Earth's surface culture is working their way towards this. People have moved from the realm of being pure individualists out only for themselves. They have worked towards pair bonding, the idea of having a significant other or a spouse, and a family structure, nuclear family. So it's like saying, I take care of my own body, I take care of my own body plus the body of my spouse that I'm partnered with, and the bodies of any of our offspring. So that's family structure. And Earth surface humans have even extended that to tribe, which is like saying, I identify with my extended family, my aunts, uncles, brothers, and cousins, and all of their offspring. And I'm going to consider all of that as quote-unquote me. And if we really, really, really stretch, we can say possibly it might be identity extended to nation state, where people have gone from tribes to identifying with the overarching country within which they live. But humans on Earth's surface have not yet gotten to the level of planetary consciousness, where they say, I identify with myself as an individual and I identify as the planet, because the planet is essential to me being alive. This is what, ancient individualists had to understand. You can either fight it out against all of the rest of everything that exists, or you can partner up. And you can say, let's work together, you and me against the world. And then you can team up into a whole team and say, let's work as a group against all of the rest of this context. And now what we need to do is team up as a planet and say, we identify as the planet is all oneness. So service to others entities have expanded their definition and sense of self to encompass the entire cosmos. It is like saying, I am the totality. I am every single possibility and probability. I'm every single spark of consciousness that exists. And looking at the world in that way, I want to help and nourish every single spark of consciousness on its trajectory, so that we can all thrive. So the difference between the beings that have raped, harmed, and imprisoned Earth for about the past 10 or 20,000 years, and the beings with whom we will be reconnecting is the difference of these two value systems. The beings that have exploited Earth did so because they did not identify with the totality. They identified only with themselves as individuals, or possibly with their own tribe of demonic entities, but not with the totality. Because if you look at the overarching organism and you look at your actions within that context, you then say, well, what I'm doing is good for me, but it's not good for the overarching organism. That's like what a cancerous cell does. It says, I am taking resources and putting it for my own projects, and I'm taking those resources away from the whole body. And if you do that enough, the whole body dies. But cancerous cells don't think that far ahead. So this is about aligning one's consciousness with the entities that can think that far ahead, that identify with the totality of the cosmos. So those entities would not harm, abuse, and exploit you as a dweller on Earth's surface, because that would reflect negatively on their own experience. So now we're getting into channels, beings. So, there are lots of beings that exist in the higher dimensional realm, and wouldn't they all love to come down here and have an impact? Wouldn't they all love to be powerful? Wouldn't they all love to cause the atmosphere to reverberate and tickle the little tiny hairs within your cochlea and instill new ideas in your brain and in your consciousness? But there's a question. Who is worthy of instilling these ideas? Which ideas are worthy of being born into the physical reality and lodging themselves in a human organic computer, a neurological computer, and being spoken about or written about? And this is a very good question, because just because you're a non-corporeal entity does not necessarily mean that your ideas are any better, or any more valid, or any more necessary to be expressed on Earth's surface. So, when I give these broadcasts, I am Aurora speaking to you. I am not Aurora stepping aside as an earthly conduit and allowing a non-earthly presence to speak through me. And I really have said this quite often with the non-earthly presences. If they wish to have to use me as a conduit, they need to take care of the conduit. There are bills that need to be paid. There's a house that needs to be, paid for in order to be lived in. There's food that needs to be shopped for. It's not just money, it's the time of going grocery shopping. Not only that, purchasing food, cooking food, cleaning up after food, sitting on the toilet after eating food, wearing clothing, changing clothing, doing laundry, personal grooming, brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, all of the things that go into taking care of a corporeal body. I, Aurora, the higher self and the expression on the Earth's surface, take care of all of these things. It is exploitive to say that I would take care of all of these things and then someone else would use my vocal cords to bring these messages to humanity. So I hope that it has been informative for me to share these new concepts here. I will go more into the idea that Earth has been imprisoned as opposed to quarantined, and what we will do in terms of reclaiming our freedom next week. So please tune in again. Thank you so much.